Today we turn to Durban, KwaZulu-Natal, where a brutal act of school violence has once again exposed the deep racial and social tensions running through our very communities. Now, 5 learners at Glenmore Secondary School in Chatsworth were stabbed after what started as a simple soccer field disagreement spiraled into a racially charged brawl, allegedly fueled by parents and former students. Now, the KwaZulu-Natal Department of Education has expressed outrage and so have so many South Africans. It began as an ordinary day at Glenover Secondary School until a small altercation between 2 learners during a school match escalated beyond control. Right now, the Department of Education says that the initial conflict, which was a minor disagreement, quickly took on a racial tone, dividing students along color lines. Now, later that day, tensions boiled over when a group of outsiders, including a parent and former student, stormed the school and allegedly attacked the pupils. Now, in the violent outburst that followed, 5 learners were stabbed. The school immediately called the police and private security, and 4 learners directly involved in the earlier fight were suspended. Now, the department wasted no time in condemning what it called a racially motivated act of violence aggravated by adults. Now, MEC Somuka said in his statement, and I quote, "We are gravely concerned that this violence was racially motivated and aggravated by adults who should be setting an example of tolerance, peace, and restraint. Parents play a critical role in instilling values of respect, tolerance, and non-violence." And now he went on further, calling out the community directly that the school's job is to educate and not to fix the failures of parenting. And I believe that's quite a powerful statement, one that hits right at the heart of this very issue. Because while schools were supposed to be sanctuaries of learning, they're increasingly becoming mirrors of the violence and prejudice and division that plows our wider society. Now, the Chatsworth community has been left shaken. Parents gathered outside the school gates demanding accountability and calling for safety reforms. Some learners described being terrified as chaos erupted. One student told a local paper that we just wanted to play soccer, and suddenly people were screaming and running and stabbing each other, and then they saw blood on the field. Now, the community leaders have condemned the violence, saying it reflects the failure of social cohesion in mixed-race communities like Chatsworth, where Black and Indian learners often clash and amid lingering apartheid-era divisions. A local parent then said, and I quote, "We fought for freedom, but our children are fighting each other. We failed to teach them what unity means." Now, the Department of Education says it's cooperating with police to ensure that all perpetrators, including adults, face criminal charges. But beyond this specific case, I believe there's a bigger systemic problem. Violence in South African schools is spiraling out of control. Now, let me say this as a South African woman who grew up in post-apartheid classrooms, this story hits hard. Because what happened in Glenover isn't just the school fight, but it's a systemic, it's a symptom of a deeper sickness in our society. When racial slurs and knives become part of our children's language of conflict, that's not their failure, that's ours. Our children are learning violence from us, from our homes, from our politics, from our workplaces and our news feeds. They are growing up in a society that preaches tolerance but practices hate. Now, the MEC is right. Discipline begins at home, but so does prejudice, and so does anger, and so does silence. And I mean, for example, we have parents, grown adults, joining school fights and throwing punches instead of teaching peace. What message does that send? Now, let's be honest, racism never really left South African schools. It just changed its form. Now it lives in jokes, in whispers, in who gets blamed when a fight breaks out. And when adults feed that beast, they raise children who think violence is how you defend your identity. Now, according to the Department of Basic Education, school violence has surged by over 30% in the last 5 years, from stabbing incidents in Gauteng to gang fights in the Western Cape and to teachers being assaulted by learners, our schools have become battlegrounds. Experts say that it's the result of untreated social trauma and the economic hardship and the erosion of moral authority at both home and institutional levels. And Dr. Mashiko says that teachers are also victims. They're facing burnout, they're facing fear and hopelessness as classrooms become war zones. Now, the Department of Education has pledged to expand its Safe Schools program, but many argue that without addressing poverty and racism and broken family structures, safety initiatives are just a bandage on a deep wound. Now, I believe that South Africa has to decide, will we keep blaming the youth or will we take a hard look in the mirror? Because these are our children, right? They come from our homes. We can't keep pretending that this violence happens in a vacuum and it happens in a country still bleeding from economic inequality and racial mistrust and moral decay. If adults are storming schools to settle racial scores, what hope is there for our children? I believe it's time to start arresting not just the learners who stab, but also the parents who incite, because it's time for community dialogues. It's time for real ones where we confront racism and teach our children to see one another as equals. And it's also time for the government to provide mental health support for every single school. Because if we don't start healing the trauma, we'll just keep repeating it. At the end of the day, this is not about punishment, but it's about protection. Protection of our children's future and their dignity and their humanity. The stabbings at Glenover Secondary are a tragic reminder that the wounds of our past still cut deep. But if we face that pain honestly, as parents, as teachers, as leaders, and citizens, maybe we can start breaking this cycle. Because a nation that cannot keep its children safe cannot claim to be free. Let's continue the conversation in the comment section. My name is Naledi Mfoloe, reporting for ADNC. Please don't forget to like this video as well. See you next time. That's it from me. Till we meet again, it is bye-bye for now.